Hello, this is Flynn and Ava from Dystinct magazine. Today we're going to talk with Julia Davies-Duff, who works for the University of Canberra and completing a PhD. Welcome, Julia.
Okay, thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for joining us today. We have some questions for you.
Okay.
What do you do for the University of Canberra?
Okay, so I am a lecturer in initial teacher education or teacher education. So my role is to teach the teachers of the future how to be a teacher. So I teach on the undergrad units and I also teach on the postgrad units. So for the undergrads, so they're the students that haven't got a degree yet. I teach foundations of early literacy instruction, so what they need to know about how to teach children how to read and write. And the fourth year unit, which is issues in literacy development, so that is on how to do interventions or how to identify sort of students with some literacy difficulties. And then my postgraduate, which is the master's students, they're the teachers that have already been teaching for a while, and I teach them all about inclusion and how to sort of be an inclusive teacher in their schools. So that's what I do at the University of Canberra, and then I also support some schools in the local area as like a representative of UC as well while I'm doing my research.
We understand that you are doing a PhD. What is a PhD?
So PhD stands for looks like Doctor of Philosophy. So the PH stands for the philosophy. And it's basically the highest degree that you can go to, but it means a lot of self-motivated work. So and I'm doing research. You have to contribute something unique to the research field. And so my PhD is on universal screening on entry to high school, because I think lots of students are missed sort of through primary school, and then they're missed actually when they're in high school. And so my PhD is looking at universal screening sort of on entry to high school. So that's what I'm doing. So it's like about a 4 year degree full time, but it's it's the one where you come out and you become a doctor at the end of it. Not a medical doctor, but a philosophical doctor.
In your role, how do you help teachers to be supportive of dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia?
So, well, I try and embed that in all I do actually. So, one of the things I say for my second year unit, so they're, that in the foundations of early literacy, I make them aware that these are specific sort of like difficulties, but often sort of like bad teaching can look like those difficulties as well. So making sure that you are teaching your children in your future class how to read in the way that evidence says is the best way, so that then if there are students that are like dyslexic or dyscalculic or dyspraxic, or have that dysgraphia, the writing, then they'll be able to identify them earlier. And then in my fourth year unit, we specifically look at profiles of dyslexia, what the underpinning difficulties can be, how that can look like dysgraphia as well, and the difference between dyslexia and dysgraphia. And we also look at developmental language disorder as well, and oral language difficulties. So I do touch on dyscalculia in my inclusion unit, but because that's more maths, it doesn't really fit with my literacy units. But then in that inclusion unit, I do cover all of the learning difficulties as well, but it's only very briefly. I'd love to do a whole unit just on specific learning difficulties.
Yeah, okay. Have you come across teachers who are against accommodating neurodiversity?
Um, no, but I think there's a little bit of resistance if they don't understand sort of what that neurodivergence that a person has. There's lots of stereotypes about certain like learning difficulties. I don't know, like with dyslexia, it's often, well, if they just read more, or they just need to try a bit harder. And it's mainly due to lack of understanding of what those difficulties encompass. So not really resistance to accommodating through just being mean and resistance, but usually through a lack of understanding and not realizing what they need, and maybe looking at as it being a bit unfair to the other students that don't get the accommodations. But I find that when you tell them more about it or get them to understand or look at the underpinnings of things, then they tend to be, okay, I get it now. And actually then they start spotting other children in their class. I found that helps more with secondary teachers as well, because they don't get a lot of that training in their secondary teaching. The primary school teachers seem to be like less resistant, but yeah, it's not due to resistance. And certainly at the university level, there's a lot of not understanding of it. Or if they're at university, then why would they need accommodations? There does seem to be this stereotype that if you have a learning difficulty, then you haven't got the capacity or the ability to go to university, whereas we know that that's sort of really quite incorrect.
Accommodations does the University of Canberra provide the learning differences?
Okay. Well, at the University of Canberra, because we are an education establishment, so even though it's a university, it's still education, we're still bound by the Disability Standards for Education. So under the Disability Discrimination Act, there's the Disability Standards for Education. So the university is still legally bound to provide accommodations and adjustments for students that meet a criteria of learning difficulties or disability. And under the Disability Discrimination Act, that's very, very wide. So at the University of Canberra, like most universities, there's an inclusion and engagement team, and any student with any sort of like learning difficulty or any sort of a difficulty, doesn't necessarily have to be just around the learning, they can go there and they can ask for a form, a bit like a learning plan in school, but at University of Canberra, they're called RAPs, which stands for Reasonable Adjustment Plan. And on there, it says, some of the accommodations that they need. And then we as the conveners get that and we provide that. So it's a bit different to school. The most accommodations, the typical ones are extensions on assignments or, some, I don't know, being a little bit more aware of handing things in late or attendance. But if there is a written exam that requires reading and writing, if a student meets the criteria, they can be eligible for a reader and a writer as well. So it's much the same as in schools, but I think it's a lot more sort of onus on the students to go and get it. But it's there and we're bound by that. And if you have any sort of readers of your magazine or watching this, there's a brilliant website called ADCET, so ADCET, and that's got heaps of information about how to navigate university and to get like adjustments and accommodations for your difficulties.
Are you or anyone in your family dyslexic?
My niece is really quite dyslexic and my cousin is. My daughter has a very like a dyslexic profile and actually a dyscalculic profile as well, but she's got hearing loss as well. So we've never been able to get the sort of diagnosis of dyslexia or dyscalculia because she's got the hearing impairment there as well. So yeah, we do have dyslexia in the family, but we also have some language disorders and hearing impairment in the family as well.
My experience is that there are some teachers who don't understand the impact of dyslexia. Were you one of those teachers, and did that change when your niece was diagnosed with dyslexia?
I don't think I was one of those teachers because when I trained as a teacher, so a long time ago, so nearly 28 years ago, I specifically wanted to go into early infants. because I was interested in development of language. I have a psychology degree sort of as a background. So as a primary school teacher, and I was a primary school teacher for sort of nearly 13 sort of years there, I was always aware of those difficulties. So back then, I suppose I didn't know a lot about dyslexia, but I knew that there were children that found it difficult to learn to read. And I was very lucky that I was in all the schools I worked in the UK. As an infant teacher, we actually did evidence-based sort of reading instruction. So I don't think I was one of those teachers, but now I look back, I wish I'd known more, because I know now that I definitely had dyslexic students or students with language disorders in my classrooms, and I wish that I had known more about it then than I do now, because maybe I could have helped them a bit better. But I think I was going okay. I think I've always naturally been interested in that, and I think that's why I went into special education. And you know, I'm with the Australian Dyslexia Association. I trained with them as well. So yeah, maybe I was one of those teachers. I don't think I was, but I always had a natural curiosity. I've always had a natural curiosity about children that can't do things as easily as their peers as well.
Okay. What do you think Australia is going with implementing evidence-based education against other countries, with the aim of giving the best support for learning differences?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think Australia is going in the right way. So I did my Masters of Inclusion here in Australia 13 years ago. And then I was surprised that I was learning about things that I had already been doing in the UK. And so that then really piqued my interest in where Australia was sitting compared to, I say the UK split up into 4 sort of like areas, and England in particular sort of was doing the phonics and the evidence-based stuff then. I'm actually from Wales and they weren't doing it there. So I think Australia's been quite slow on the uptake, but it's gathering momentum, and certainly in the last 5 years, really gathering momentum. There's still that resistance, and people say it's coming in quite quickly. But when we look at the reading inquiries, for example, the Australian one was in 2005. So that was, 20 years ago. So it's not slow. It's been around for a while, but I think there's a lot of resistance, but it's gaining traction, and it's great to see all the states and territories sort of coming together with the idea that, oh, this is what best practice is, and we should always be basing, as practitioners, I think we should always be basing our practice on not who is saying it, but what is the best thing at the moment. And at the moment, the best evidence we've got is to teach in this evidence-based way. That said, there is still a lot of resistance, and even in my own faculty at the university, there's resistance, but that's what makes for the critical thinking, I suppose. So compared to other countries, I don't know. I can base it on my experience when I taught in the UK, and certainly when I was teaching in England. But I don't necessarily know about the other countries. I know obviously the US is pushing it forward. Canada has been sort of like very good. They've actually managed to bring in the rights for reading under the under the Human Rights sort of Commission as well. So Canada's done quite well there. But I can't say that I know exactly what every single country is doing. But I think Australia it's gaining momentum, and that's exciting. Us in the field are excited about it.
What message do you have for people with learning differences?
I think a learning difference is just a learning difference. We just sort of like learn differently, and we all sort of have similar brain structure, but it's just those with learning differences just need maybe like a lot more repetition, or things sort of given to them in what we call like multimodal way. So give the worksheet together with the instructions as well. So obviously it's not learning styles, that's like, sort of been debunked, but those with learning differences is just a difference. And if you get the right accommodations and the right adjustments, and certainly if you advocate for yourself and tell your teachers, not just I want this, but I need this, and this is why, I think that self-advocacy means that you can go as far as you need to. Certainly working in the university sector now, I see many exceptionally bright students that have dyslexia or dyscalculia thriving, but they've needed the right adjustments. But that's not to say that it isn't a struggle. I think either or both of you are dyslexic, is that right?
Yeah,
So
both of us.
yeah, and so that it takes you longer to do things, doesn't it? And you have to like do it, whereas some people can get it after 2 or 3 times, you probably need more and more, and that's an added load for you on top of everything else, isn't it? So you're having to work harder. So it's finding a way, but there's nothing to stop you, but I think advocate for yourselves so that people understand what you need and what the additional difficulties you've got. And it's not that you can't do it, it's just that you can't do it on the same basis as your peers for that task. Doesn't mean that you can't for everything else, but for that task.
Yeah, okay. What message do you have for people thinking about teaching as a career, particularly those who have something like dyslexia?
Themselves, I don't think it should be any barrier. And some of the best teachers that the new teachers I've been teaching, and certainly some people I've worked with, have been dyslexic. But teaching is a career where you are teaching others like how to learn, and so you do need to have like a level of skill in some of the areas. So it's I suppose if you're modeling things on the board for your students and you're teaching them how to spell, you would have to probably do a lot more work to ensure that you are spelling things correctly on the board, and so that adds to your teaching load really. Likewise for the reading, you're always going to have to be reading things, but there's lots of accommodations like speech to text and text to speech, but you're going to have to be modeling the correct procedures and the correct way to do things to your students. So I think it's an added level of complexity, and teaching is a pretty full-on job, certainly in the first couple of years where everything is new and you haven't quite got your sort of automaticity in your practice yet. So that's like another layer of complexity for you. But I think any teacher who is dyslexic or anything can become a teacher, but just knowing that you will need to have the skills to model to the students.
We have listeners from across the world. Where is home for you?
Oh, so home for me at the moment is in Canberra, so in the ACT in Australia, so the capital of Australia. I suppose my home is Wales in the UK, and then but London is sort of also then where home was, because I was there for sort of nearly 15 years as well. So home at the moment is Canberra, and this is where my family is as well. Come and visit.
What is a fun fact about you?
Oh, fun fact about me. Oh, I know. I used to work with Father Christmas up in Lapland.
Ooh.
There you go. That's a fun fact.
Thank you, Julia, for your time. We think what you're doing is amazing. Don't stop the great work.
Thank you very much. And don't stop what you're doing either. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. That's Dystinct out.